sure enough, there's the local dialogue, but there's also this national conversation that's happening around philanthropy that I think people need to be plugged into. And I think that's what gatherings like this provide.
It was really helpful to hear the speakers and the panelists frame how they think about when is a good time to invest in a district, what are the what's the framework for successful investments. That was very helpful.
I mean, it's hard to believe that it was only 10 years ago that this effort really started with mayoral control in DC. Of course, the charter school movement has been around longer, more like 20 years in DC. But not so long ago, people regularly said, and I think they were right, that this was one of the worst systems in the country and one of the worst places in the country to be poor. And now, all of a sudden, I think it's been completely turned on its head.
Many of the Philanthropy Roundtable K-12 forums that I've attended in the past all seem to be surfacing a common set of themes, essentially a kind of a core set of ingredients to a recipe for high quality ed reform, and a lot of those have to do with entrepreneurship, a focus on continuous improvement in data, a real smart thinking about talent. A number of these kinds of attributes really around sort of what makes education innovation continue to be the ones that surface over and over and over again.
We don't do a very good job of problem analysis. I think we're very quick to go ahead and jump to a solution to what we perceive as a problem without understanding that if we identify the wrong solution, we create unintentional consequences.
It really started in the opening session yesterday when there was a lot of talk about making sure that our messaging is positive and keeping students first. And I really appreciated that.
If you keep doing the same thing over and over again and you think you're going to get different results, that's the definition of insanity. So at some point in time, I just wonder if my colleagues in the foundation world could possibly think about just giving 20% of the money that they give to something different, to something revolutionary, to something that has risks attached to it. But the payoff is immense, like what VCs do, right? That's what foundations are supposed to be, VCs. They're not supposed to fight battles that are 25 years old.
And I think that the more we see that if this is about helping our young people, they live in an interconnected life in a community that has multiple issues that they might be facing, and we need to think about education as one lever to really create change in a community. So I'm hearing some of that conversation today, and I'd love to hear more of it.
And the fact that in California we have many, many children that are coming from households where there's dual language, there's two different languages being spoken. I think that, the demographics that we're seeing in California are actually ones that are going to continue likely across the country. And there are already many states that are not California, but that are states you wouldn't normally think of: Minnesota, Atlanta, Georgia, that have really dense pockets of families that are speaking multiple languages, and the ability of those children to really have educational models that view that language as an asset, particularly for their long-term economic competitiveness. We need schools that recognize that asset and can continue to support students in developing those multilingual skills.
I think that when it comes to urban education reform, I'm convinced that the charter and choice agenda is absolutely the right one, and that we're getting better at it. That we are getting better at building high-quality charter schools, solving problems around facilities. I think even in the private school choice side, that there's been more willingness to hold those schools accountable, and I think that's a good thing. I think we're still struggling to figure out answers for low-performing schools in rural communities, in inner ring suburbs that haven't yet been touched by charters and choice, and other kinds of suburbs. I mean, the urban education problem is the most acute one, but it's hardly the only one.
There are communities out there that have some pretty good answers. They have assets. And sometimes I think we walk into communities and see them through a deficit lens. And I think we have to be better at understanding what the assets are in those communities and engage people in a process to use those assets in collaboration with the resources that philanthropy can provide. Because then I think that can cultivate a winning solution in some of these communities.